Hey, how you doing? It's a beautiful day in it, right? Man, wow. You know, maybe it's foolish to care so much about a sports team. I mean, at the end of the day, you're just going to turn the TV off and go back to your life. So, who really even cares that much anyway? Why would you watch anybody else when you got powerhouses like the Packers, Patriots, Seahawks, whatnot, teams with storied histories, a bunch of legends, and, you know, actual championships? Even down in Florida, you got the Dolphins with their Halls of Legends and the undefeated season, and the Bucks, who, despite being the worst professional sports team in America, at least they got two rings to their name, right? But if you had to name off every NFL team right now, Jacksonville would probably be one of the last ones you think of. I mean, what do they have? In their entire history, they've done pretty much nothing. Because nobody thinks about the Jags, right? They might just be the most irrelevant team in the whole league. And yet, why do they fascinate me so much?
Jacksonville, let's just say, is not somewhere that comes to mind when thinking about places to visit in Florida. I mean, you got the amusement parks in Orlando, the beaches and culture in Miami, the streets of Cigar City in Tampa, the history in St. Augustine, the Speedway in Daytona, the Kennedy Space Center. I could go on. What does Jacksonville have to offer? Well, nothing apparently, as it holds the most prestigious honor of the most boring city in America. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, with these kinds of people, nowhere's boring. How can a place be written off when we got a helicopter coming down on the field of the Gator Bowl in 1979, carrying none other than Colts owner Robert Irsay? He's holding high hopes, as does Mayor Jake Godbold, with interest kindled in bringing a professional sports team to here of all places. To prove himself, 50,000 people have packed into the seats, all holding matches and signs and wearing printed shirts and cheering on one message: "We've got Colt fever, baby! We want football!" Regardless of what happens tonight, as your mayor, I will do everything in my power during the next 30 days to make sure the Baltimore Colts become the Jacksonville Colts. Anyway, 30 days became 3 months, became a year, became 4 years, but finally the Colts are moving away to the greener pastures of Indiana. Well, I guess it was just a mild case. Yet, as always, Floridians wouldn't back down that easy. 8 years later, we're back with another team looking to move out, and another owner flying in. This time, Bud Adams of the Houston Oilers. With the lease on the Astrodome set to expire, he met with Jacksonville and looked down the eye of a $125.8 million guarantee over 10 years. Raised through sales of 25,000 10-year season tickets. When faced with that kind of money, it'd be hard to turn down. I mean, he said so himself. Well, that's exactly what he did, as the Oilers would remain in Texas for the time being. So, following a certain baseball team, the city decided to take matters into their own hands, launching a group dedicated to bringing an expansion team to Duval County, headed by businessman Tom Petway, and including a bunch of guys and the one and only Jeb Bush. The years would pass, with campaigns among cities demanding Jacksonville as the frontrunner for the expansion, with Arthur Chick Shearer leading the charge. We're the #1 candidate, and we can prove it. Well, chick, I don't know if offering a chick sex for a whopping $40 is the best way to go about it. Even better, that woman was an undercover police officer, and 5 days later, he would resign from the podium. Classic Florida, baby. Now they've even already got a name and a logo before even being guaranteed a team. Why the Jaguars? Well, as Vice President Rick Catlett would say, because no other professional sports team has it. Well, that's certainly a reason. I mean, isn't that why every team picks their name because it hasn't been taken already? Let's just say, the Jacksonville Zoo has the oldest living jaguar in North America. See, now that wasn't so hard. At least it prevented the alternate reality of the Jacksonville Stingrays. I mean, come on, what a dumb name that is. Who would ever want to be named after a stingray? Their case continued to build as the list of expansion candidates narrowed down with it. Come on, why would you pick a city like Charlotte, huh? Look, boom, baby! Jacksonville is so good, we're blowing it off the map! Well, even though they were only one of 5 cities left for consideration, the hopes of actually landing a team remained slim, citing the small market size among other factors. It doesn't really help when the Gator Bowl is literally rusting over. The city already budgeted $60 million for renovations, but that was clearly not going to be enough. If the stadium was going to be the deciding factor, then that meant it was back to the drawing board. Of course, the city heavily resisted, and the ensuing debate left their hopes of an NFL team in near ruin. The new proposal, estimated to be around $148 million, was labeled absurd, unacceptable, and negotiations crumbled into petty insults hurled back and forth. The breaking point was reached when relations crumbled between the group and the mayor, with the last-ditch proposal being shot down resoundingly. And it was over. And yet, it was the NFL itself that turned the light back on. Jacksonville wasn't off the table yet, as underneath it, negotiations continued on. One more deal to renovate the Gator Bowl for $121 million awaited a decision from the city council. Beyond a miracle, the deal passed, and hope was kindled once again for the faithful of Jacksonville. But seeing the mess that fell before them, it was left uncertain if this spark would even amount to anything. The NFL needed to be convinced of the city's economic viability. 10,000 club seats was set as a benchmark, to be sold by September 3rd, just 10 days after the deal got approved. It was up to the people of Jacksonville to save their team. Wayne Weaver, once disgraced and distraught, would pick up the final 1,000 if the group got the other 9,000. But it would still prove to be a great challenge, $750 a pop, plus another $750 if they actually got a team. The last time they launched something like this, sales sagged amid the crumbling negotiations. Time was ticking. So, with nothing but the hope on their backs, a small movement was headlined down in the streets, with billboards, volunteers, PSAs, and TV adverts. Perhaps the best way to spread the word, a van along the parking lot of the Regency Square Mall, was selling club seats like they were hotcakes. By the end of the first day, they were already up to 1,456. By the end of day 5, they were up to 6072. So blisteringly close. And yet, interest dipped, with only 730 sales on day 6 and 461 on day 7. Time is running out. Come on, pull out the stops, men! Get everybody involved! Call the banks and tell them to offer no-interest loans for club seats. Send couriers to pick up application forms. Get a free medium pizza from Domino's with a completed form. Cross the state line if you have to. We need those damn tickets! Wayne Weaver is officially back. And with the lease agreement signed, Jacksonville was back on the market. And after months of waiting and presenting and praying and being angry at the NFL for holding out on them, on November 30th, 1993, the dream became real. The Jacksonville Jaguars were a myth no longer. The city and the people made this happen, in a move never seen before or since. Jacksonville banded together as one, and brought in a team themselves when all hope had seemed lost. No matter what happens now, over the next 30 years, that can never be denied. This is Duval's team, now and forever. So, being a Bucks fan first and foremost, I can't say I'm the most genuine voice to talk about this team. So, why don't we get somebody who is?
Hello to all 12 of Loopy's viewers. I am the J. I am a Jaguars fan. I can't say I've been a Jags fan my entire life. I have lived in Jacksonville since I was a young age. As I was growing up, the Jags were in a completely atrocious era where I didn't care about football, and the Jags did not give me a reason to care about football until one very particular event happens, and then I have become unwaveringly obsessed with this team. And I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for my own health, but fuck it, we ball.
Now, here we are, September 3rd, 1995. With a crowd of 72,000 people packed into a stadium that was basically rebuilt from the ground up, rising from the dust as the Jacksonville Municipal Stadium. They'd be led by former Packers backup quarterback Mark Brunell, a man not even picked up in the expansion draft, but earned the starting role with his performance in the preseason. Their first game pitted them against the very same Oilers that almost moved here 8 years prior, and while they would ultimately prevail today, the Jags would get their revenge a few weeks later on the road, as a last-minute drive in the fourth saw Brunel complete the pass to Desmond Howard to take the lead and earn their first win, as Houston's field goal would be no good. The very next week, they would host Pittsburgh and stun them, treating the Jacksonville faithful to their first taste of victory. It would be about all they would get, as after earning another win to get them to 3-5, they would lose their next 7, including a 44-0 shellacking at the hands of the Lions. Yet their record made it worse than it seemed, as they weren't being blown out or run through the door like a typical expansion team would be. They had some honest-to-God potential out there. Just look at that Steelers game, going toe-to-toe with a team that would eventually go to the Super Bowl and come out on top? Now that's more than luck. That's some honest skill. Maybe it had to do with how they were raised, fittingly also in a process unlike any other. Coach Tom Coughlin wanted to push the team to make them ready, starting training camp a week earlier than usual. To escape the Florida summer, they headed to Wisconsin and kept players guessing on what was to come. But, as we all know, there's no escaping Mother Nature, as they would be stricken down with a brutal heat wave upon the Midwest, with heat indexes in the high 120s the day camp began on July 10th. Throughout it all, 85 people in Wisconsin would be killed, as well as 850 cows and dairy herds. Supply chains tightened, advisories were published. Do not go outside because the cows are literally dying out there. And yet, the Jacksonville Jaguars are out there, twice a day for 5 hours, beating the crap out of each other. No AC in the locker room meant bringing in huge barn fans, which didn't really do much to help. And worst of all, they suffered an ice shortage. Football operations were getting pissed because we were going through so much ice. Athletic trainer Mike Ryan would say, "They kept fighting us. You're doing something wrong. You're using too much ice." Players frequently went down with heat illness, perhaps due to being in full pads, full contact, 6 days a week for both practices a day. Nowadays, limitations are in place to keep players safe, but in '95, different story. One day had 13 guys out of practice with injuries, Ryan would say. All we needed was a kicker over there and we'd have a whole team. There's no way anything like this would fly in today's NFL. As Tony Bozelli would later comment, the CBA would literally throw Coughlin in jail if he tried to do what he did in '95. There'd be a revolt. All 90 guys would be picketing outside the stadium. It would never happen. You can't even fathom it. And yet, it was not purposeless, as Coughlin knew these guys had to be tough. I've got to get them ready right now because they're going to have to be tough, because they're not going to be talented. So, they'd better be tough. That camp would be the one and only time they were outside of Jacksonville, but it would serve as a boon for the team's success, as they likely would not have beaten the Steelers without it. I think we were united in that we went through a lot together, defensive lineman Jeff Lageman would say. Tough offseason, tough training camp. We were a tough, physical, try-hard football team, but we weren't going to win a lot of games in '95. If people are being honest with themselves, they probably knew it. We still fought tooth and nail and fought and scratched and probably won some games we should have lost, and were in some others that we probably shouldn't have been. Just another way of the Jags doing things their own way, and not giving a damn about what anyone else thought. People were thrilled, with over 1 million fans pouring in to see the new team. Good for 7th best in the league and high above those pricks in Charlotte. At long last, the city of Jacksonville was relishing in the high of having an honest-to-God professional sports team. All that was left was for the team to start producing, which would seemingly have to come later, as despite once again beating the AFC champion Steelers at home, they would drop 7 of their next 9, falling to 3-6. Still, they were keeping it close, with all but one game being a one-score contest, but they just weren't able to get it done. Morale was beginning to dip among the players, and especially towards Coughlin, who ran them as strictly as possible, with a rulebook thicker than a slab of plywood. Tom the Tyrant, as he came to be known, as the start of team meetings would be headlined with a projector running through every single damn rule in there. It got so specific that you could be fined for wearing a bolo tie, not wearing the right socks, or that you had to wear a collared shirt. One man, Andre Rison, was a constant source of trouble, coming off a bad season in Cleveland and always being irritated by his poor performance. He would be described as a fierce competitor, and predictably drove Coughlin crazy, as he didn't return phone calls and frequently showed up late. Before a game in New England, Coughlin was going on and on about Dave Meggett, prompting Rison to speak up. He would stand and address the room. "Coach, I've got something to say." "Fuck Dave Meggett!" For the next 5 minutes, he would launch into a rant about what they should do to counter him, how he should get the ball more, why the team just wasn't clicking. And at the end of it all, how did Coughlin respond? "Well said, Andre. Well said." Sitting at 3-6, the team gathered to feast on a well-enjoyed delicacy, Krispy Kreme donuts. A weekly ritual, a time of levity. But on this week, as Coughlin came to join them, the mood was shifted, and the room went silent. At once, every man stood and left, expressing their resentment for the coach in the process. All, except 2 men, tackles Bozelli and John Yurkovich, the 2 fat guys. But that moment changed Coughlin, making him realize the sinking ship before him, and how desperately they needed to change course. He began to lighten up a bit in practice, just a small nudge that helped ease the tension. Rison was eventually benched after running the wrong route in a loss to the Steelers, causing Brunell to snap at him on the sideline. The day after, he was cut, and it was for the better as it helped settle the mood in the locker room. Brunell, little by little, began to grow, molding into the franchise starter that the team needed. He knew that Coughlin would let him know exactly what he thought of him, and he wasn't afraid to share his feelings. The beacon was lit, and the culture began to change down in Duval. A close overtime win against the Ravens, then a back-and-forth shootout in the rain to take down the Bengals had them gaining momentum. Facing the Oilers, they held firm, clawing their way back to 500 with 2 games to play. All of a sudden, this team had a real chance at the playoffs, with their last 2 games at home. Down 13-7 against Seattle, they would battle back to notch their 4th straight win, and control their own destiny in the last week of the season against the Falcons. For these guys, a young squad suddenly thrust with expectations, they could feel the pressure. Sure, the Falcons were terrible, but the Jags were just unable to pull away, squandering a 16-3 lead and barely holding a thin 2-point lead with no time left. But of course, Atlanta would drive down the field and set up deep, trotting out Morton Anderson for a 30-yard chip shot. He'd made 59 straight from that distance, dating back 7 years. You're sitting over there thinking they have Morton Anderson. They're in field goal range. It's over. We're done. But on this day, Morton Anderson made his name known in Jacksonville for all the wrong reasons.
And it's no good! They're in, Kev.
Only in Jacksonville will you invite a kicker from another team to an award show and give him a standing ovation for missing a field goal. And well, Anderson took it with stride. But as for the Jags, they had gone where no expansion team had before, making the playoffs in just their second season, sneaking in with a number 5 seed, playing with nothing but house money. Did it matter? Of course not. The Duval faithful was already busy partying the night away. Everyone except Tom Coughlin, who kept himself brief. We're going to win this week, so don't listen to the talk that you don't have a chance. The Buffalo Bills were perhaps the furthest team away from the Jags at this time. 4 straight Super Bowl appearances, though let's not talk about how many rings they came away with. Hall of Famers all throughout the roster, including Bruce Smith, Jim Kelly, and Thurman Thomas. 39 degrees at kickoff in one of the toughest places to play in the league. It's no surprise that Jacksonville was written off from the start. Sure enough, they took off running, sprinting down the field and dropping 7 in about 2.5 minutes. It appeared that the Bills were poised to run away with it, but their fortune would change at the hands of one man.
Intercepted by Clyde Simmons! Touchdown!
While Buffalo would respond with another score, Jacksonville would keep it close, eventually taking the lead late in the second with a big run from Natrone Means. Yet the game would be tied at the half, and the teams would trade field goals to make it 20-20 after 3. A gutsy effort to be sure, but the bubble wouldn't hold forever, as now it was Brunell's turn to be picked off and returned for 6 to start the fourth quarter. But they just wouldn't quit, as if training under the intense heat hardened their will and prepared them for a moment like this. You can't give up, you can't sit down, because you're tougher than this. So get the hell up and fight.
Brunell is great on the quarterback draw. Instead, he throws it quickly to Smith. Touchdown!
With Buffalo getting the ball back with about 8 minutes left, it was in the hands of the defense to save the season. And they didn't just respond, they put an exclamation point on the score sheet. Tack on a Mike Hollis field goal, and the Jags had the lead with just 3 minutes left, where the defense would do the rest. A lot went into this day, ranging from Means running for 175 yards to Bozelli putting on an all-time showing against a legend like Bruce Smith. But it was the spirit of Coughlin's regiment that made them earn this moment, to tell the league that the Jaguars were not to be taken lightly. And yet they still had work to do, as against top-seeded Denver they once again found themselves doubted. Newspapers calling them Jagwads, mocking their efforts, with scaffolding already in the end zone being set up for next week's AFC Championship game. The Broncos would jump out to a 12-0 lead before Jacksonville could even get a first down. It's as we all knew, this team just doesn't belong here. And yet, even Denver would come to learn to never doubt the spirit down in Duval County, as after their first 3 drives ended in punts, they would never be held off the score sheet after that. By the end of the half, they'd taken the lead, and another touchdown would make it 20 unanswered. Finally, the Broncos were able to stop the bleeding to make it a 3-point game in the fourth, leaving all the pressure on Brunell to answer. And facing a second down at midfield, he put the city of Jacksonville on his back.
Now 30, 25, and dives it to 21. Oh my, what a...
With a 29-yard scramble to set them up deep. Even as they sputtered in the red zone, time continued to tick away. Facing third down, Brunell turned to the one man he could count on the most, Jimmy Smith. Diving for the catch that would define a young team just budding for success. The clock would strike midnight on the Broncos as they would fail to recover the onside kick. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, just 2 years into their young existence, were heading to the AFC Championship.
If there's one thing I think pretty much everybody in the NFL has learned, it's that you ain't owed shit. You dominated your way through the season, putting up insane numbers, clobbering everyone in your path. But you know what? That doesn't matter. If you want a ring, you gotta earn it. And yet, so many teams just keep falling for the same trap. Overconfidence, ego, pride, whatever. I mean, the Bills have been to 4 straight Super Bowls, and the Broncos had their Hall of Fame quarterback, John Elway. There's no way they could lose, right? And yet, they did, like countless teams before them and after them. And yet, as the Jaguars walked into Foxborough, they thought the Patriots were the weakest opponent they'd faced yet. And that's when it bit them too, because no one is safe. No one.
All of a sudden, the fearsome offense found themselves choked by the bitter cold. It took until the second quarter to even get out of their own end of the field, kicking a field goal to make it 7-3. But of course, Adam Vinatieri would be as reliable as ever, and the defense would completely shut them down. A fourth down stand early in the third left them staring down a 7-point hole in the fourth. Down they marched, led by the arm of Brunell as they came within spitting distance of tying the game. Lofting the pass for Derek Brown, he... At the very least, the defense was able to stop them, but that left Brunell with one more chance. From the 42 with 2.5 minutes left, it's time to save the season. But of course, there's no reason to hang your heads. The Jacksonville Jaguars did a lot more than just go on a crazy run. They stamped their name in the history books and proved that they deserve to be remembered. They pried open their window much sooner than anticipated and looked poised to make another deep run soon enough. Looking back, Boselli would have nothing but confidence. I remember thinking, this wasn't that hard. We're going to be back here. This is going to be a regular occurrence. We'll get to a Super Bowl. To rub one last salt in the wound, the Packers would go on to win it all that year, featuring none other than Andre Rison, who caught a touchdown and finally got himself a ring. Well, that's just how it is. But for Jacksonville, things would never be the same after '96. Now they had expectations, a bill to fill to follow up an astounding deep run. Now the Jags were the ones to be feared. Excitement was through the roof, even as Sports Illustrated picked them to win the AFC. The team had overcome adversity before, so why should now be any different, huh? Well, a knee injury in the preseason had their burgeoning star quarterback miss the first 2 games, thrusting the role onto backup Rob Johnson's shoulders. Facing Baltimore, he would stand tall, throwing for 294 yards and keeping the Jags in contention. But the defense began to show its flaws, allowing deep drives that saw them trailing late in the game. Yet with a bad ankle, Johnson was able to benefit from the brilliance of Jimmy Smith, with a last-minute touchdown to pull away the win. But that left Johnson out for Week 2 against New York, bringing in their third stringer Steve Matthews, who also played well under the spotlight, throwing 252 yards. This time the Jags would pull away quickly and never look back, cruising to a 40-13 win. Finally, thanks to a convenient bye week, Brunell was able to make his much-needed return against the Steelers on Monday night. On the ground, they were heavily outmatched, but it was on the back of Jimmy Smith that the Jags prevailed, as he logged 164 yards with a blocked field goal, leading to a huge win over their division rival. Thankfully, that would be the end of their injury troubles at quarterback, though they weren't able to prevent a kid from getting stuck inside the maw of a hungry Jaguar. Who knows how that kid got in there, but it cost Touchdown the Jaguar his tooth. How sad. Yet even with their star quarterback back in the saddle, they would struggle to put together wins. The offense sputtered when it mattered, and the defense kept giving up big plays. However, they balanced it out with flashes of brilliance, like taking down the high-flying Chiefs and beating up on the Oilers some more. But once again, those damn Patriots would foil their plans, with a rough game at home to put the division out of reach. Yet they were still able to pull out wins in their last 2 games to finish at 11-5, and return to the playoffs and back into Mile High. And, well, you can't keep running on the devil magic forever, as John Elway and the Broncos were definitely furious about their upset the year prior. They would jump out to a 21-0 lead early, and despite the Jags pulling in within 4, they were unable to bring it back, being annihilated on the ground. The Broncos would pull away 42-17 en route to a Super Bowl victory, and Jacksonville was left once again playing second fiddle. Heading into '98, the goal was clear: win the division, assert yourself, and get over the hump. They still ran it back with largely the same group of guys, though with the addition of first-round running back Fred Taylor, a Florida boy born and raised who quickly made his name known, piling up 213 yards against Baltimore, mostly on the ground, which is where he would truly dominate. With his help, the Jags shot out to their best start yet, going 5-0, though in typical fashion these were not easy wins. All but one were one-score contests. Yet more often than not, they were able to pull away, climbing up to 7-2 before heading into Week 11. There, Taylor would come face-to-face with some old friends, including Riedel Anthony, a buddy from high school who ended up being drafted by the Bucs the year prior. He would end up performing well enough on the team, sticking around for a few years, though he was never seen as a star. One day, the two of them were hanging around Clearwater Beach, riding their jet skis and having a good time, and Taylor found himself feeling a bit boisterous. He walked right up to the Bucs defense and said, "Man, I'm gonna have 150 yards on y'all." Of course, this wasn't just any defensive unit. You're talking to Derek Brooks, Hardy Nickerson, Rondé Barber, and Warren Sapp, perhaps one of the most dominant squads of all, and the force that would propel the Bucs to their first Super Bowl win in 2002. Yet on this day, Sapp would laugh him off, saying, "All right, Freddie, I'll remember that. Don't write a check your ass can't cash." Now here we are, a warm November day in Alltel Stadium, and Sapp wouldn't let him forget it, pummeling Taylor for a 1-yard loss, That check's gonna bounce today, young man. Yet he would pull himself back up, punching down the gut to open the scoring. To end the first, he would get his fingers all over the drive again, notching 3, 9, 6, and another 3-yard carry, resulting in his second touchdown of the game. Yet the Bucs would push right back, taking the lead at halftime. In the third, Taylor would shine, hauling in a 15-yard pass to start off, then a big 30-yarder to set the Jags up to take the lead back with a field goal. Funnily enough, Riedel Anthony was matching his performance, posting 2 scores of his own, including a 79-yard bomb to start the fourth, in what would become his best game of the season. Yet Taylor was not about to let himself be outmatched by his friend, not by the defense he'd talked so much smack about. Down by 1 with about 3 minutes left, time was running thin. He had to cash the check. "128 yards on the ground and 68 through the air, easily clearing 150 yards and proving once and for all that he was legit. He would finish the year with 1,223 total yards and 14 touchdowns, a breakout rookie campaign. As through his efforts, the Jags remained in close contention for the AFC Central crown. Despite losing a close matchup with Tennessee, the Jags still sat at 10-4, 2 games up with 2 to play. The next week they would lose again, but with the Oilers' loss, the Jags would wrap up their first division title in franchise history, giving the Jacksonville faithful their first taste of playoff football. Fittingly enough, they would play host to the team that soiled their Cinderella run, the New England Patriots. Revenge was at hand, though in typical Jags fashion they would get off to a slow start. Once again, mostly thanks to Taylor chugging away, they put 6 points on the board to start the scoring. Then he would handle it himself for the game's first touchdown. From there, the defense would keep things handled, holding New England off the board until the third, where a long drive resulted in making it a 5-point game. At this point, it looked to be just the same as before. The Jags were running out of gas, as Vinatieri would cut it down to a 2-point deficit. Yet when faced with adversity, the big names came out to play once again, with Smith hauling in a 37-yard score to put the Jags up by 9. Tack on a couple field goals, and Jacksonville would finally get their revenge for '96 with a 25-10 victory. But of course, their run was just beginning, as they would face the New York Jets in the divisional round. You know, back when the Jets were actually good. Running off the same script, the Jags let themselves fall into a hole early on, giving up 17 unanswered before another Smith miracle had them emit some kind of pulse, making it 17-7 at the half. But this time, there was no second half comeback, as Testaverde and the Jets just ran all over the Jags defense, tacking on score after score. Despite Brunell's best efforts to catch up, he would still find himself down by 7, and with his back against the wall, he barely even made it out of his own end zone. One more chance came flying through the air, only to be picked and seal the loss. And it was over again, but their window had not shut yet. One more chance. Just one more chance to put something special together and make it happen. They've got all the right guys. All they need is to get hot at the right time. And who knows? Anything's possible. But of course, you ain't owed shit in this league. If you want to win, you have to prove you deserve it. Coming into '99, it was clear that the Jags needed to improve their defensive game, which ranked 25th out of 30 and ultimately led to their downfall. With a new defensive coach and hopefully being aided by a weak division, this was the season to really break out. Their stamp was made with an obliteration of the 49ers in Week 1, handing them their worst loss in nearly 20 years. Already, the defense was able to pick up a pick six and a scoop and score against a team who'd posted 16 10-win seasons in a row. Another dominant win against the Panthers had them at 2-0, but another force was brewing within their division. Sure, Baltimore wasn't looking like much. The Bengals haven't posted a winning record in nearly a decade. The Steelers had one of the worst offenses in the league in '98. And, oh look, the Browns are back. And, they are indeed playing football again in Cleveland. But seemingly out of nowhere, the newly christened Tennessee Titans were coming off a pair of divisional wins and were looking to make their own statement. Yet without quarterback Steve McNair, this game looked to be easy pickings, as the Jags would pick up another pick six to give them a 17-7 lead heading into the fourth. Things weren't without issue, as Jacksonville was missing Fred Taylor due to a hamstring injury, and the defense was slowly starting to slip, giving up 2 field goals to make it a 4-point game. But in the worst possible moment, Burnell would deliver a pick right into the hands of the Titans, who capitalized to take the lead. With one last chance, Burnell would come all the way down to the 3-yard line, only to be picked again, sealing their first loss of the season. A brutal game for sure, but one that only served to add more fuel to the fire. That tough loss was quickly brushed off by beating up on Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and getting revenge on the Jets to improve to 5-1 before entering the bye. When they returned, they looked like one of the most dominant teams in football, demolishing the Bengals and Falcons by a combined 71-17. Funnily enough, they followed it up by riding the leg of Mike Hollis to a 6-3 win over the Ravens. That game solidified a streak of 6 in a row with 10 or fewer points allowed, a feat only matched by the '85 Bears, a Super Bowl champion. It didn't matter who stood in their way, as the electric duo of Smith and Keenan McCardell would terrorize the league, with the former putting up over 1,600 yards in by far his best season. Taylor would continue his dominance on the ground, as well as James Stewart. 3 men on defense would put up 10 or more sacks, as Bozelli and Kevin Hardy would be recognized on the All-Pro First Team, with the latter even receiving Defensive Player of the Year votes. In a complete turnaround, the Jags' defense went from the basement to the penthouse, only being matched by the Bills and their in-state brothers down in Tampa. Did it matter that their schedule was pathetically easy, the 5th easiest in the last 50 years? Maybe. But as long as you get the wins, that's all that counts. The 1999 team, do you think that they could have gone all the way and won the Super Bowl?
I definitely think they could have gotten to the Super Bowl. It's kind of the thing that, the St. Louis Rams are just kind of considered the greatest show on turf, and I have no idea how we would have stacked up against them. I'd like to think, the Jags would have blown the break off the Rams that year. But I'm not gonna go so far as to say that yes, absolutely, they would have won. I know they definitely would have won the Super Bowl or they would have gone to the Super Bowl if they didn't face the Titans, that's for sure.
Winners of 11 straight, still a franchise record, had the Jags poised to take the division crown. But of course, one team still stood in their way, those damn Titans, who sat at 11-3 ahead of their Week 16 matchup. No matter, this team will not make the same mistakes again. They'll... This was not a game. This was a massacre. A cold, hard slap to the face in the form of McNair dropping bombs all over a once-thought unshakable defense. It wasn't even close. Sure, the Jags would stomp Cincinnati the next week to win the division. Sure, they posted the best season in franchise history at 14-2. Sure, they still looked like a prime candidate to make the Super Bowl. But this just feels incomplete. The one team who held their kryptonite seemed to have stolen the devil magic from them. I mean, they were dead to rights against Buffalo in the wildcard round. How did something like this even happen? Somehow, the Jags found themselves looking at a mirror image. The young, scrappy team from '96 who took the league by storm and surprised everyone in the process. They even upset Buffalo, the same team Jacksonville did. And now Tennessee goes to face the Colts, while the Jags host the Dolphins. The possibility of facing those goddamn Titans in the AFC Championship is very real. And what does Jacksonville think about it?
Hey, you, what you gonna do? Hey, you, what you gonna do? 49ers, what you gonna do? Ravens, tell me what you gonna do? Jets, what you gonna do? Steelers, what you gonna do? Cowboys, what you gonna do? When the Jags come for you? Falcons, what you gonna do? Browns, what you gonna do? Carolina, what you gonna do? Them Jags coming for you. Yo, you thinking Jags, here they come. You better run, Forrest, run. Because they're coming to your town. Big Cersei about to break you all down.
Your Honor, I don't remember doing any of this. This does not happen. This must have been like a fugue state or something, so you can't hold any of this against me, okay? Anyway, where were we?
Well, they looked to prove they weren't a fluke against the Dolphins in the divisional round. And things started innocently enough, with Brunell leading his team down and hooking up with Smith for a touchdown within 5 minutes. With that, Miami took the field to respond, and on the first play, Aaron Beasley would pick it off and put the ball right back in Brunell's hands. Unfortunately, they would only settle for a field goal, but they wouldn't have to wait much longer, as Miami would get a whopping 7 yards before having to punt, pinning Jacksonville deep in their own territory. Did Fred Taylor give a shit? What do you think? Anyway, here come the Dolphins to try and respond, and oh my god. My brother, it is 24-0, and it's only been 12 minutes. Tony Brackens, the man who scooped it up and ran 16 yards for the score, had more yards than the entire Dolphins offense, who would finish the first quarter with 9. 9 yards! And yet somehow the obliteration was only just getting started, as the second would kick off immediately with Brunell finding Taylor, again, to make it 31-0. To answer, the Dolphins would take a sack and go 3 and out again, and to rub salt in the wound, the punt would be blocked and set the Jags up at the 21, where it only took 2 plays to make it 38 unanswered. They had the chance for even more, as Beasley would pick them off again. But as if feeling merciful, the Jags couldn't score and were forced to punt for the first time. Then, after over 20 minutes of game time and already surrendering 271 total yards, did the Dolphins finally get a first down. And it wasn't even thanks to a successful play, it was a DPI call that helped them cross the line. They followed up the first real shot of life in this entire game with 3 straight incompletions and a punt. How absolutely breathtaking. Yet it seemed Jacksonville was almost toying with their food, as Hollis would miss a 39-yarder to give Miami a small smidge of a chance. But of course, on their second play, Donovan Darius would force it out for the game's second fumble, putting Jacksonville at the 7-yard line and poised for more. But hey, it's okay. Burnell will be picked off in the end zone. Oh wait, it's not even Burnell. It's Jay Fielder coming in to relieve him after he was sat to rest before the half was even over. And don't worry, it doesn't get any better for the Dolphins, who would throw one more incompletion before fumbling the ball again, leading to a field goal to make it a 40-burger. But hey, look! Miami actually managed to make it down the field, and they scored! Wow! Did this help them come back and win, though? Absolutely not! By halftime, the Jags were already looking to next week, and even more so as Jimmy Smith would notch another monster run for his second score. When it was all said and done, they'd put up the biggest playoff blowout in NFL history. 62-7. That was an anomaly. That doesn't happen. The Dolphins were a good football team. Every call, every play we had, everything they did against us set up perfectly for us. Okay, well, talk about a statement. Kind of feel bad for the Dolphins. Wonder who their quarterback was. Oh! Huh. In what would be the last time the legend took the field, he would go 11 for 24 with 4 turnovers and a measly 95 yards to his name, before he was pulled in the third. Meanwhile, the Jags would drop 520 yards of offense, including 14 sacks. Wow. And so, that set up a date with destiny, fittingly against the one team they couldn't seem to beat. If they wanted to arrive at the biggest stage in football, they'd have to take down their nemesis from up north. No longer were the Jags the underdogs, they're 7-point favorites. Now they're the ones playing host. But remember guys, you ain't owed shit. You have to earn this win. Right off the bat, Brunell and Taylor would pick it up from last week, running down the field and scoring quickly to build up the confidence. Yet the Titans would respond, methodically marching along and punching in their own score. Of course, the Jags weren't going to replicate their explosion against Miami, but things were still looking okay enough. An interception off McNair would be met with going all the way down the field, only for Burnell to suffer the same fate. Yet they always had someone to back them up, in this case James Stewart, who would run it up the gut for a 33-yard score. Jacksonville was holding a 14-10 lead and was getting the ball to start the second half. Okay. We got this. And yet, for whatever reason, they just stalled out. They couldn't even get past their own 35, and thanks to key completions and penalties, Tennessee would easily make it all the way down and take the lead. No matter, it's fine, it's still plenty of time left, and, oh no, come on man, not now. Yet with their backs against the wall, the incredible Jags defense would give them one last favor, stripping the ball away at the one to breathe a shot of life into this team. This is a momentum swinger. Please, do something! Well, when I said something, I meant literally anything but that, but it's still a one-score game, still plenty of time to bring it back, as long as they just hold on. I don't recall much from the actual game, but I remember the feeling I had at the end of it, tearing up the Super Bowl sign I had made. The euphoria from the previous week to dark despair the next. From leading at halftime to getting shut out in the second half, a tragic fall for a team. Never before this day did I realize how much this team meant to the city of Jacksonville. Maybe our early success kept me from seeing the truth, but I realized that day, while teary-eyed along with 75,000 of my closest friends, that we needed this team, and this team needed us. It's been 27 years since that day, the day the Jacksonville Jaguars were forever changed. Their heart and soul were laid out on this field, in front of the thousands of fans who banded together to make this team a reality in the first place, in a city largely forgotten by the rest of the country, and dismissed by the NFL for being too small, too decrepit, undeserving of a team like this. And yet, here they were, because no one can expect the sane or the normal to come out of Jacksonville. No matter what, this team will always have this season, even as the pit of misery would swallow them whole and never, ever relent. On this day, January 23rd, 2000, the Jacksonville Jaguars fell in the AFC Championship for the second time in 4 years. And their golden age would come to an end.
Wait, what? But it's only been 5 years. I mean, we're not even a quarter of the way done yet. Can't be that bad, right?